The next item I want to add to my Photoshop drawing is shadows. If you see the SketchUp underground, you can still see some of the shadows that were cast in the SketchUp model. But whatever we've drawn so far, we have drawn it without respect of the shadows on the side. The shadows will be sitting on top of the surface, but in order to set the shadows, I should make sure that the vertical elements are properly placed in the hierarchy of the layers above all the ground elements. Currently, my statue and my plumeria are below my grass layer, whereas my grass layer is a ground layer, while the statues and the plumeria are vertical elements. So I should lower the level of my grass to go below my verticals. So I move it at the layer below the ground covers, like that. So now layer 2 was my guideline layer, which I'm not using, so I switched the visual off, and my statue and plumeria layers and my ground cover layers are above all the layers that represent the ground surface. Now I will be switching off the ground surface layers first, and I will only be looking at the basic side drawing like this. So now you can see that actually there was a shadow cast onto the floor here, and this shadow I will need to bring it above the layers that I have been drawing. So I will be drawing a new layer above my grass level, and that layer I will color it completely black. Is a black layer. And then what I will do for that layer is draw a layer mask that represents the area of shadow that is cast on the ground. So I will use my pen tool and I will start tracing the area that is covered in shade. Actually, I can include the wall as well, so that I can control all the shade for the side. Here we go. I will fast forward for a bit. I have now selected all the shadow areas on the back wall and on the floor in a path. So now I can turn my path into a selection, make selection. So this is my path, and I can go to this black layer and add a layer mask. So this is the area that I have currently covered in my path. Now I can see that actually I forgot a little bit here, so I can still add that area to my path by using my lasso tool, for instance, and just adding this area here to my path. So I just go to my path and I color it white like that. So this is my path that I have created. So now if I switch back on all my different background layers like this, I can actually now reduce the opacity of my shadow, because now my shadow is completely black. But if I reduce it to say 30%, you can see that the shadow actually realistically works. Now I have forgotten that this area here, this walkway here, is actually never colored. I have never added a new texture to it. So if I'm not planning to change the texture of this area, I can actually remove my shadow from it, because the shadow from SketchUp is still on there. So what I do is I select that area, and on my layer mask I color it black, so that I do not have a double shadow. So that is the shadow on the walkway. I do have shadow on the grass, which currently the shadow on the grass is a little bit straight, considering that the grass itself is not very straight. So what I can do is, again, I can use a spatter pattern kind of finish or a grassy kind of finish in a brush. So I just choose a spatter pattern brush, and I can, with white or black, add some irregularities to the shadow that is cast onto the grass, to reduce that sense of precision. Or I can even try to use the grass brush and then set both to white or white and black, and then add some grass brush spatter pattern. Or maybe I set both to white is better, and then reduce the scale a bit to make it more, so that way my shadow becomes a little bit more irregular. So it doesn't really matter. When we zoom out, you can see that as long as that shadow isn't too harsh, it works. So either the spatter pattern or the grass texture. Actually, the spatter pattern probably gives me a bit more the freedom that I want on the grass area, to just make sure that it represents that unevenness of the surface. So this one I can turn around. So here I can roughen the edges a bit to give a feel that the grass is not exactly a homogeneous surface. That's all that we need to do. So usually I will just have a black and a white texture here ready for adding transparency or opacity to my layer mask, and then I use the X key to switch between the two, so that I can choose to either add opacity or add transparency until I get the feeling that my shadow is about right. See, I can add bits of softness to this. That's the key. I don't want my shadow to look too hard when it is on a surface that is soft. That's actually all I want to achieve. So you can also, if you wish, use grayscales in between white and black. But basically you can see the difference here in the left grass area. I've sort of softened up the edges of the shade. Here in the right grass area, you can see I haven't done it yet, and you can see the difference, that this still looks a bit unrealistic in the sense that the shadow doesn't seem to represent the actual softness of the grass texture. So I will just continue adding more softness to this so that it looks more natural. That's all. So that is adding the basic shadow to the ground. Now I've also introduced some extra vertical elements that may require shadow. Currently, if you see the planting here, it looks a bit overly bright. So maybe I move my shadow above the level of the planting, and I can even move my shadow above the tree, giving this idea that my tree is also standing in the garden. Now the next item that I have to think of is adding the shadow for the tree to block down the plaza here, because actually the wall shadow here is represented here on the floor, but the tree is not dropping any shadow. So in order to do that, I will go to my plumeria layer, and I will select with the magic wand tool. Here, magic wand tool. I will not have the contiguous selected. I will just select outside of the tree like this. So then all the transparent areas are being selected. Then I inverse my selection so that I have the tree selected. Now I can create a new layer below the tree layer, and I can make this layer black. So I fill it black like this. You will not see much because the tree is blocking it, but if I switch off the tree, then you can see it. I can deselect this, and now I can actually move this black layer down a bit, and I can then transform it, distort it, and try to get some sort of mirroring effect like this, until such a point that I actually can mirror my tree onto the ground like this. I can move it down a bit. So that's the effect that I want, so that I have a shadow mirror of my tree. And this mirror tree shadow, I can actually add it to my shadow on the ground. So these two shadows, I want to merge them. But one shadow is made out of a layer mask. The other shadow is actually purely a shadow. So what I can do first is I need to temporarily fill my shadow to 100% again to sort of synchronize these two shadows. Then I can click on my layer mask, and then I can call this apply layer mask. Apply layer mask will turn this into a flattened layer without a layer mask, but with the values of the layer mask. Now these two layers, the layer of the original shadow plus the layer of the tree shadow, can now be merged. So I select both the layers together, I right click, and I choose merge layers. Merge layers here. So now I have one shadow layer, and now again I can reduce this to 30%, for instance. 30%, that's it. And now I have a very nice shadow in my garden. So this concludes the shadow adding section. Now the only thing that I need to add is a person for reference. So I have already gotten a person into my files. This is the PSD file men, right? Basically what I have done here is I've taken a picture of a person, this picture, then I have selected the white, and then on that, and then I've inversed the selection and created a shadow figure. I prefer to use shadow figures over actual photos of people because the key element in our drawings is the garden and not the people. So you don't want the person to be a distraction of your garden. So I take this silhouette or this shadow figure, I go to duplicate layer, and I duplicate this into my garden progress drawing. Here we go. Now the main thing left is I put him all the way to the foreground, and I make sure that his eye level is at the horizon, like that. And now all that is remaining is I have to scale it down to the right size, something like that, and that concludes. Now I can choose to reduce the fill a bit, and that's all there's to it. Okay. That concludes this last tutorial, and with these skills you should be able to generate your own perspective drawings as you wish.